Oh, whoa.
You're here to see David and Kathy?
Oh my gosh. Okay. What is she? She just invites everybody. She's inviting everybody tonight. That's awesome.
Jordy?
Yep. Well, welcome. She's really invited people. It's awesome. She's got somebody online too that she invited from all the way from Germany. So it's a big night.
Are you wanting to wear masks?
No, you don't have to anymore. It's up to you if you want to or not. You don't have to. No. Okay. Kathleen's amazing. She invites somebody from Germany, and then she has here people here that came to see her live. I can't. I was saying when I couldn't tell them I can't really talk here.
Hey Zoomers, we've got some stuff going on here that I'm a little bit confused, but our Zoom favorites, or a couple of our Zoom favorites, Kathleen and David, have some local friends who are here. Like this is like, I don't even know what to do. This is new to us. So sorry, Jen, I know you're like 3 hours ahead. I don't know what to do. Oh, and Leslie, you're like 8 or 10 hours ahead, right? But we're all friends of David and Kathleen, and they are famous tonight. Stand in front of the camera and the microphone and tell our Zoomers what's going on. Kathleen, stand there and tell us what's going on. We don't know what.
Everybody left. We've got a lady on from Germany. She's gonna read in German and English.
Okay, what happened is David and I were in a writing group with Shelley, and I emailed her and said that we were going to be in Port Alberni because she stopped the writing group and moved to Qualicum. And so I emailed her and said, well, we're going to be in Port Alberni just in case. And by surprise, she showed up. But also to another person that was in the writing group. So it's really weird. Yeah.
Oh, I haven't. Who's not on there?
So my gosh, there are so many people here.
All right.
Just want to come up and talk to Zoomers.
I think we need to get started here. Actually, has Margaret arrived, Karl?
Those that are things on there.
I've signed in, but I don't know if I'm on the list.
Karl is in charge of the list with the green shirt. Karl is totally on top of it. I said,
Dean,
Karl
you're on the
is
list. Don't worry.
list. Right? He's totally on top of it.
Hello. Yes, you're on the list. You're right after Joe.
Okay.
So anybody want to read? Talk to Karl.
Last chance.
The hat on got called by their Margaret's son to be here. So Margaret's son.
Oh,
No, I know.
doesn't somebody else want to get up here? All right, let's test. Where am I supposed to stand? About here? Is this
That's good and loud. That's good
Can
and
you hear
loud.
me, Derek?
I can
Do
hear
I
you
need
loud
to
and
stand
clear.
closer?
No, that's
Do I
fine.
wait for the echo?
Hello.
That's fine right where you are.
He's not giving, he's giving rubbish advice.
Oh, it's good. It's good.
Oh, okay. That means all right. You can hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, she was
Is it better when there's an echo or when there isn't?
There she is.
I don't hear an echo.
We knew you were on your way because your friends came, because your son told them, so I don't know. Oh, yeah, but why not? Why
All
not
right.
blame somebody else?
I don't know. There's an echo.
Find
Is that
blame
better?
somebody else. Huh?
We're not getting the echo over Zoom. Maybe it's just there in the live.
Derek, can we do a sound check?
Sound check.
Absolutely.
Derek?
Yeah, absolutely. Char, how's do you want the sound check from the mic or from me? Between us?
Well, I can't hear anybody.
Yeah. Anyway, I'll keep talking and hopefully that's what you wanted because you disappeared off my screen. How does that sound for volume, Char? Is that good?
Say, hey, Port Alberni. Hey. Sorry, can
Port
you hear
Alberni.
me?
Hey.
Derek, can you hear me okay?
I hear you just fine, Char.
We've
Yes.
got lots of activity here, lots of fun people, lots of stories. So that's what we do with Electric Mermaid Live Reads. So thank you. And if you can hear in the house okay, our Zoomers, Leslie in Germany, what time is it there right now?
3:05.
3:05 a.m. Okay, everybody pay attention to Leslie in Germany. It's 3:05 a.m. Thank you. Thank you. Hardcore. And Jennifer, it is like
9:05.
9:05. It's wine time in Ontario. Okay, and can you hear us okay? Okay, and Derek is at home. And what time is it in Port Alberni at your home right now, Derek?
Last time I looked, it was about 6:05.
6:05. Oh, okay. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
thank you. It's a lovely evening, and I think our sound check is okay. And
Good.
I'm going to turn it over to Karl, right? Thank you. Have a great night, guys.
Electric Mermaid, Emcee Derek Hanebury is a Port Alberni writer of poetry, fiction, and creative non-fiction who taught writing here at North Island College for many years. His latest book, Both Sides Now, a collaboration of short fiction with two of his past students. His upcoming collection, which is already out, is something else.
Something else altogether. Thank you, Karl, for that. And good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Electric Mermaid for September. Hard to believe it's the end of September already. But wonderful to see everybody there. And I wish so badly I could be there in person, but I don't want to give this cold that I've got to anybody else. It's enough that I got to deal with it. So grateful to be here and happy to see so many people signed up for reading and to see that we're getting some new folks coming live and some new folks coming through the Zoom platform as well. That's fabulous. And thank you to Kathleen for getting Leslie to tune in from Germany, and she's going to share some work with her soon. I want to say we're coming from Port Alberni, which is situated on the unceded territory of the Hepetcheseth and Sishat First Nations. We're grateful for them sharing their territory with us, and such a beautiful territory it is. And we want to say a big thank you to Charlene, our hostess with the mostest, who is managing this Zoom platform and managing things in Char's Landing there in beautiful downtown Port Alberni at the same time. Let's have a big round of applause for Charlene and all she does for the community. Thank you, Charlene. And thank you to Karl, our moderator, who hopefully everybody got to see who wants to read. If you haven't seen Karl yet and you plan to read, you better scoot up there and get on that list, because it's getting finalized here pretty quick now that we're getting underway. There's Charlene. Hello. Hi. And for those of you who might be wondering about Electric Mermaid and where that name comes from, Charlene was just waving at us from a window where you could see Luma, the Electric Mermaid, suspended in the rafters at the back of Char's Landing, which is the hostel and entertainment hub of Port Alberni that Char runs. And so LUMA, the Electric Mermaid, is a community work of art that hangs up there, and we thought it'd be appropriate to name our reading sessions after LUMA because it was based on such a communal effort to create LUMA. And what we do here at the Electric Mermaid is also, it's volunteers coming together to create a community space where we can share our writing and at whatever level we're at, and get some inspiration from each other and some praise from each other, some encouragement to keep going at this, what is sometimes a challenging task, but ultimately I think is one of the most satisfying things you can do in this world is put language together and create works of art. So I'm really excited to hear everything tonight. We have Margaret Growcott, our local writer, who's going to be sharing with us from her debut novel in a little bit, and excited to hear that. And so we're going to get started right away. And we're going to let Lesli go first because she's all the way over in Germany, and it's 3:05 in the morning, and she might want more sleep or not. But anyway, we're really glad to have you here. And looking forward to your poetry. And you were saying beforehand, you're going to read it first in German and then in English afterwards. So it's all yours, Lesli. Take it away.
Okay, thank you. We had I was saying before, we had a Corona project. I'm in this writing group in Germany. And I live near Hamburg, by the way, up in the north. And in the Corona time, we had this project where we were sent 2 photos of the Elbe River, different scenes along the river every month. And we just wrote text or a poem or whatever to the photo. Okay, so I'm going to read just 2 poems, but first in German and then in English. I did it because we had the time, and I just was experimenting with German and English to see what different picture I could get if depending on the language I was writing in. Okay, the first one was a picture of 2 people on the beach, and my husband and I, we spend as much time as we can in the North Sea on an island called Helgoland, and I just remembered the first time we ever went to Helgoland. And the poem is called Momentaufnahme. Die Sonne geht unter und in ihrem letzten Rot ist es unsere Zeit, vor dem Vorhang zu treten und im Scheinwerferlicht stehen, während wir barfuß auf unserer Meeresbühne unser Versprechen wieder flüstern, gefüllt mit Erinnerungen unserer ersten Zeit hier, wenn alles noch neu war und fremd und wir verkündeten, dass dies hier unser Stück ist und wir die Schauspieler und es wird nie enden. Snapshot. As the sun sets in its final glow, it's our call now to part the curtain and stand in its spotlight barefoot on our ocean stage, renewing our vows, filled with memories of our first time here when all was new and strange, and we proclaimed that this was our play and we its actors, and it would run like this forever. That was a snapshot. And then we had a picture of a bird what had jumped from this thing in the water and was just standing there like it had, didn't know what to do. And I wrote a poem and I just called it Jump. Du dachtest, du hättest mich im Griff, nicht wahr? Am Ende erschauderte ich jedes Mal in Erwartung deiner Fragen, wenn du mich nähertest, Zielscheibe meines Gifts. Was tatest du nicht, um mir die Flügel zu stutzen, meine Herkunft, meine Fähigkeit, meine Freiheit in Frage gestellt, bis ich sie selbst in Frage stellte? Was tatest du nicht, um mich unsichtbar zu machen, mich beschimpft, in Kategorien gesteckt, die du erfunden hast, um dir das Leben zu erleichtern? So getan, als wäre ich nicht da, konnte nicht verstehen, was du sagtest, bis ich nicht verstand, worauf du hinaus wolltest. Was tatest du nicht, um mich am Boden zu halten, aber du hast vergessen, dass gestürzte Flügel wieder wachsen, die Natur Flügel zum Fliegen gemacht hat, um in den Himmel zu steigen, nicht nur um zu jagen, auch um auf den Jäger herabzusehen. Du hast nicht begriffen, dass selbst die jungen Trottellummen auf Helgoland den Sprung von den Klippen in die Tiefe wagen, bevor sie fliegen können. Auch sie gehen nicht unter, sondern fangen sofort an zu schwimmen. Und ich bin schon längst von der Klippe gesprungen. And of English, also called jump. You thought you had me under control, didn't you? In the end, I shuddered every time you approached me in anticipation of your questions, target of your venom. What didn't you do to clip my wings, question my heredity, my abilities, my freedom, until I questioned them myself? What didn't you do to make me invisible, called me names, put me in categories you invented to make your life easier, pretended I wasn't there, couldn't understand what you were saying until I didn't understand what you were getting at? What didn't you do to keep me down, but you forgot that clipped wings grow again? Nature made wings to soar in the skies, not only to hunt, but to look down on the hunter. You didn't realize that even the young guillemots on Helgoland dare to jump from the cliffs into the depths before they can fly, and do not sink, but immediately start to swim. And I jumped from that cliff years ago.
Wow.
So.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much, Leslie. That
Thank
was
you.
beautiful. And fascinating to hear the German first and then the English and you know, sort of the anticipation of what mood is being conveyed here. And it was, I think I caught it all right in the first one, but the second one I was totally off base. You know, I was into more of a romantic space, and then when I heard it in English and the content and of course the inflection and everything, it was much more serious and intense there. But beautiful poetry. Thank you so much for sharing. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
And I hope you'll think about coming back to join us again. I know it's an ungodly hour of the morning, but you know, you find yourself up at 3 o'clock.
Actually, I'm surprised how wide awake I am. I got up this morning at 1:30, packed my school bag, and I thought, oh my gosh, I'm awake.
Ready to go.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, well, thanks so much. And like I said before, if you can stay awake and listen to some more, please stay with us and enjoy.
Thank you very much. I'm planning to stay awake.
Very good. All right. Take care. Okay, our next reader for this evening is H.L.Bryce, I believe. I didn't see Herb on the Zoom.
Herb's not on, so we'll go to the next one.
Oh, okay, Herb didn't make it tonight. So we're going to go on to Jennifer then in Ontario. We'll get our two long distance readers done first. So live from London, Ontario, the Forest City, Jennifer, take it away.
Good evening, Port Alberni.
Mm-hmm.
It's nice to be back again. First, a shameless plug off the top. I have a full-size, a very large poetry collection coming out in the fall sometime. We'll of course be letting everybody and their dog know about it when it's finalized. There's some proofreading and such to do. It's called Hear Through the Silence, and the title actually comes from one of the things I'm going to do here, as you'll see. Now, one of the things that I like to do every so often as a poetic palate cleanser is to write haiku. And I have to have a place that calls out in the right sort of way in order to do it. And I stick to the 575 syllabic structure and try to have sort of a nature thing connection to it somehow. But I've got going writing it in threes, like groups of three. And I find that an interesting way to do a very concise portrait of something or other. And what I'm going to do is read, one of the little sections in the book is called triptychs. And it consists of 6 of these haiku triplets. So because they're so short, I'm just going to read those. The first one is called 3 Haiku for Algonquin Park. If you've ever been in Ontario, some of you may know that Algonquin is a really, really special place. About 5 or 6 hours north of me, but it's a great place that I have enjoyed a number of times. So 3 haiku for Algonquin Park. 1, woodland trail beside a stream burbling in my ear, a black fly seeks food. 2, plash of the paddle gently stroking round the bend, a grazing moose stares. 3, unearthly loon calls echo across the water, a crackling campfire. And the second little triptych is called 3 Haiku for Turkey Point. That's down on Lake Erie, south and east of where I am in London. And it's the family cottage has been there since my mother was a little girl. And so it's sort of a special place, obviously. 1, far out, sudden gale, Grampy's experienced hands guide us safely home. 2, cooking marshmallows, watching moonrise on the bay, embers perfect now. 3, old Sandhill was here, swallowed now by green, living still in memory. And the next one goes much farther afield. And 2017, I had a trip with my 2 kids, they're now 32 and 28, to China. And my daughter, who was living in China, had already been in Hong Kong, and she had to get back to school a little bit before the end of the trip. But my son and I hadn't, of course, seen it. So we went out there and went to Lantau Island. There's this little thing called the Wisdom Path, which is kind of neat. It's described in here as to what it is. Hopefully you'll see. 1, a peaceful trail from bustle to entrance, flitting butterflies beckon. 2, inscribed stelae guide on infinity-shaped path, ancient mountains watch. 3, script unreadable to me, heart sutra meaning flowing from all around. The next goes way farther afield too. Comes from a trip in 1987 to the Galapagos Islands. 3 haiku for the Galapagos. 1, ignoring me, a hopeful blue-footed booby scans the horizon. 2, Sally Lightfoot crab scuttles nimbly in vain search of a missing limb. 3, through volcanic scrub, ancient tortoise languidly lumbers stretching time. Another special Ontario place is the Bruce Peninsula. I love the Bruce. It's a wonderful spot, and I've been there a number of times, and I've always really enjoyed it. It sort of sticks up in between Lake Huron and Georgian Bay. 3 haiku for the Bruce. 1, flower pot pillars stand guard, rocky balance acts through eons of storms. 2, escarpment hugging Bruce Trail, forever grasping for Manitoulin. And 3, glass-bottomed tour boats puttering circles disturb harbor shipwreck sleep. Next one, I'm gonna have to look on my computer. Piece of paper's gone astray. Just bear with me 1 second. This one might be recognizable to BC people. It's called 3 haiku for Peyto Lake. Beautiful spot in the Rocky Mountains. 1, sea of soaring peaks, tourist passage hears nearby whispering magic. 2, rock flower patiently glacier ground is employed by the divine palate. And 3, Rockies hike over ridge, curving round, and down there, outlandish turquoise. And the last one, 3 haiku for Visegrad, Hungary. This was a trip to Central Europe, and there's this castle up on a crag near the Danube River. 1, Danube's endless flow, medieval crag-mounted castle pays homage. 2, tourists still en route, morning stillness calling out, hear through the silence. 3, stone obduracy yields, time's illusion dissolves, past caresses now. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Jen. And thank you for reminding me about how something that small can evoke so much. And that's, you know, I mean, that's poetry is compression, but haiku is hyper compression, right?
It really
yeah.
is compressed, yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Thank you. Bringing back some of my old stomping grounds in Ontario too with that. Okay, we're going to go to our featured reader now tonight. So we're going to go live to Char's Landing and get Margaret Growcott to come up to the microphone there. And I think she's heading that way. And yes, we've got applause going on. Yes, applause for Margaret. So let me tell you a little bit about Margaret before she gets started. For those of you who might not know her, she has been a compulsive writer since high school, and she won a prize for an essay. She was born in England, grew up in a small seaside town in Cheshire, and attended college in Liverpool. And since coming to Canada, Margaret has regularly written stories and articles for magazines and newspapers, now lives here on beautiful Vancouver Island. And she's going to share with us some passages from Bales and Spires tonight, I believe, her debut novel. And we're really excited to hear that. And her books are available at Mobius Books if you're in Port Alberni, or on Amazon, Chapters, Indigo, or the publishers, Reason Press in Victoria. And of course, always from the author herself. And I'm sure she'd love to sign it for you as well. So Margaret, thank you for agreeing to feature here at the Electric Mermaid. We're really happy to have you here. The microphone is all yours.
Thank you. Okay, I think I'm ready. Oh. Hi, yes, can everyone hear me?
Yes, just stay close to that microphone and it's all good.
Okay, that's my book. Okay, sorry? Tell me when I can go. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so first of all, I'd like to thank everyone at Electric Mermaid and Char's Landing for asking me to come this evening to read from my book. Although this actually came out last year, I didn't do much about it because my husband had recently died, and he was the one that helped me a lot and helped me with some research. I just didn't have the heart to do anything, but I'm feeling I can do a bit more of a launch now. Anyway, before starting to read parts of my book, I would just like to comment. I hope Derek's watching this right now. Just like to comment on something that I read in Derek's last book. It's called Something Else Altogether, and there's short stories, and one of them is called The Wild Pounding of My Heart. And some of you may have read it. In case you didn't, it's about a writer who, like me right now, goes up to read from their novel. There's no easy way to tell you this, but the poor man expires on the podium. He falls, grievously banging his head on the hard wooden floor. And he had said his heart was pounding before he went on the stage. So we don't quite know what happens to him. Derek doesn't explain that. But I thought, well, I hope that doesn't happen to me. But I like the story. It was quite riveting, actually. Anyway, my story starts in England in the reign of Queen Victoria in 1882. I just started at the very beginning, which is a little bit maybe sad, but there are some very light-hearted parts of it. But in the beginning, Jane was going home. She should be happy. She had dreamed of this day when she would see her mother and 7 sisters after almost a year away, but her father had not said a word since they got on the train. He seemed preoccupied, gazing out of the window. She put her small hand in his, but still he stared out at the disappearing cranes of Birkenhead and then the green fields with their cows and sheep slipping past. He'd been saying for weeks it was time for her to go home. And today he had said they must go home immediately. She could hardly wait to see them all, especially her favorite sister, Kate, who was now, Jane figured, 21. She loved them all, of course, but she'd always been a little scared of Emma, the oldest sister, at 23. There was a brother too, the oldest of the family, but he lived in London and Jane had never met him. Before she was born, the family had come to Lancashire as they were assured of finding work in the numerous cotton mills there. Algie had stayed behind in London as he was 14 with a good job at the post office. A few months after the move north, Jane had been born. By the way, in the front of my book, for those who haven't been to England lately or haven't been at all, there's a map and it tells you all the places in my book that are mentioned, from London up to Lancashire, up to Scotland, and so on. So a lot of people said they found that useful, having the map, so they can look where these things are taking place. So the families moved from London up to Lancashire, which is about 200 miles, which was a huge distance in those days. Anyway, the last time that Jane had seen her mother, she remembered clearly Ma had not been well that day and had been lying on the sofa by the fire, listless, hardly saying goodbye to her youngest girl. But now, hours later, when Jane and her father reached the small terrace house in Chatterton, her mother was not lying on the sofa. She was lying in a coffin. Only then did Jane understand why this coming home had been so sudden. She ran to her favorite big sister, Kate. Kate eyed her father critically whilst hugging her little sister. Charles Kershaw shook his bowed head. He had tried and failed on the way home on the train to prepare Jane for this. Jane had longed to see her mother for so many months. Was that really her lying in the cheap pine coffin in the cold front parlor? She looked older than Jane remembered. It was just as well the weather was wintry for the end of March, as she would have to lie in the front room for several days. No fire could be lit in there. "How old are you now?" asked Sister Alice, nearly 3 years older than Jane. "Oh, yes, you must be nearly 10. So you'll be going to work half days at the mill, like me and Amy." "I suppose so," said Jane, turning away before Alice could start lecturing her on what was to come, having worked half days at the cotton mill for the past 2 years. Emma managed to stop a comment that immediately sprang to her lips. How she wished her younger sister, who had been such an alien child a year ago, would not have to work in that environment. The damp climate was bad enough. It was, however, ideal for the textile industry, as the delicate threads did not dry and break. Emma herself had worked in a cotton mill since they had come from London 10 years ago, when there had been a slump. It seemed this region at the foot of the Pennines in Lancashire would never stop attracting workers from all over the country, who flocked to the seemingly limitless employment opportunities. And British engineers were constantly reinventing the best spinning machines and weaving looms that turned those raw bales of cotton into thread and fabric. There's a little bit about food here. I'm skipping a little bit, just this might be of interest to people now. They go to the local shop, Jane and her older sister, Kate. "We need some butter and milk and maybe some brawn." Kate rattled the coins in her pocket as they walked down to Mrs. Kendall's shop. She carried an empty pail while Jane clutched an old chipped cup to put the butter in. The butter was in barrels, one either side of the front door of the shop. One of them was almost empty, the other one full. Jane remembered she should go to the barrel on the left, where she would have to scrape her cup around the inside. It was more expensive to get butter from the other full barrel. At home, her job would be to pick out the bits of wood before the bread was buttered for tea. Today, they might have meat on their bread, even if it was only brawn, that type of meat made from calves or sheep's heads. Not much meat in it, though, but plenty of gelatin. Jane didn't care for it herself. She would eat her bread with nothing on it. "I see you got your little sister back," said Mrs. Kendall. "And what can I get you today?" "Butter from the cheap barrel and some milk," said Kate, placing the empty pail on the counter. "Oh, yes, and Emma said to get some of that brawn, the other day." "Sorry, love, there's no more of that till butcher comes Saturday," said Mrs. Kendall. "And there's no delivery from Dodd's farm today, so I can only let you have 2 pints. Kate held the pail while Mrs. Kendall ladled 2 pints of milk into it. "Don't you want tripe for tomorrow? Don't you always have it for dinner on Thursday?" reminded the ever-resourceful shopkeeper. Kate hesitated. Emma had not mentioned the tripe, but it might have slipped her mind with Pa and Jane coming home so suddenly. "Well, we better take it, I suppose," she said, putting the lid on the pail. Jane was thankful Emma insisted on the better quality washed tripe and not the unwashed green tripe, which was much cheaper. At least Emma made it reasonably palatable by simmering it slowly in the oven with plenty of onions. But Jane would rather not have to eat the inside of a sheep's stomach, however much effort Emma had put into it. "What's with that bonny sister of yours?" asked Mrs. Kendall. "Which one?" said Kate. "I have 7 sisters, as you know, Mrs. Kendall." "I mean Eliza, of course. If you mean, is she going to the new mill once it's open? Well, you know as much as we do, Mrs. Kendall," said Kate. "I didn't mean that. I'm talking about your Eliza and my nephew, Billy. Joe says they've been walking out together." Mrs. Kendall's brother, Joe, was the wages clerk and knew everything that went on at the Glebe mill. "Joe should mind his own business," Kate said to Jane, and shook her head, implying it was all nonsense. "Enough of that tittle-tattle," said Kate as they walked home. She was hauling the pail of milk, and Jane carried the cup of butter and the parcel of tripe. Then a little bit more about when she arrives home. She was the center of attention as her sisters bombarded her with questions about her absence for the last 11 months. She remembered her first night in Birkenhead, hardly believing she had left home. Even though she was with her father at the lodging house, she missed her mother and cried herself to sleep. She dreamt she was at home, happy, even though they were having tripe for dinner. Jane hadn't liked the school in Birkenhead. It was so much bigger than the one in Chatterton. She had scarcely got to know any of the pupils, finding them distrustful and unfriendly, and they spoke with a weird accent. If it hadn't been for Mrs. Kelly, landlady of the lodging house, she would have been very lonely when her father was at work. Mrs. Kelly was from Ireland, and Jane really liked her. Another thing she liked about the lodgings was the piano, an old battered one that had yellow keys. Some were missing. Jane found this instrument to be a source of fascination and occupied herself for many hours picking out tunes she'd heard the lodgers humming, and often some hymns she remembered from church back in Chatterton. Birkenhead in the county of Cheshire was a fairly big city, although unlike Liverpool across the River Mersey, it had been spared most of the ravages of the Industrial Revolution. If you looked straight ahead, there was the Irish Sea. And if you looked to the right, there was Liverpool, just visible on the horizon, with all its factories, docks, and ferry boats. By contrast, 40 miles inland, Chatterton was in Lancashire, on the Rochdale Canal near Oldham. Once undulating farmland, there were still green fields to be seen, although more mills were being built owing to the huge demand for cotton production. Chimneys dotted the skyline in Chatterton. If Jane half closed her eyes, The church spire she passed on her way to school in Birkenhead looked just like the chimney at the Glebe Mill, where some of her sisters worked. Now, 11 long months later, she was home again, but Jane almost wished she was back in Birkenhead. Ma was gone. She would miss her father and Mrs. Kelly with her excellent cooking, especially the Sunday roast chicken, something they rarely had at home, and the buns bursting with raisins Mrs. Kelly made every Wednesday. And she mostly already missed that piano. So what was it like at the seaside, Jane? Said Alice as they finished tea. It wasn't really the seaside. It was all shipbuilding, cranes, where Pa works. There was a beautiful park, though, with flower gardens and woods and a lake with a bridge going over it. They called it the Swiss Bridge. I pretended we were in Switzerland when I walked over that bridge with Pa. Alice might have been more attentive if Jane had said she'd been to Timbuktu or seen the Taj Mahal. Pa did take me to the seaside once, though, on my birthday. It's called Birkenhead. No, New Brighton. It's near Birkenhead. It was wonderful. Golden sands and a long pier where you could get ices and see a show at a music hall. Alice, an aspiring actress, was finally interested. Oh, I'd love to see one of those shows, she said. You didn't go to a music hall, surely? Asked Emma sharply, who had never been to one herself, but had heard plenty about them. You're far too young. Yes, at 10 years old, Jane was far too young to see a music hall show, but she wasn't too young to go to work at the mill from 6 o'clock till noon every day, and then become a child again and go to school in the afternoon. She would do this until she was 12, and then she would work full-time at the mill. Okay, I'm going to skip a little bit, just not too much more, to a little bit later in the story, different subject. Christmas was approaching when the herald angels were being hearkened to and the merry gentlemen were being arrested. As usual, the girls were sitting around the kitchen table having done their chores for the evening. Jane and Amy were reading. Kate was doing some embroidery, so was Eliza. Emma was entering figures in her housekeeping book and doing additions. The twins were looking through their music. There would be plenty of singing for the church choir over the Yuletide, including some carol singing parties when the girls could join in, going the rounds of the big houses up on the hill. Alice was the only one not sitting down, pacing round and round the table, mouthing silent words and throwing her arms about. She was learning a poem that she was to recite at the end of term in 2 weeks' time, when she would be leaving school to go and work full-time at the mill. Pacing up and down, Alice was the only one to hear the knocking on the door. She rushed into the hallway to open the front door, which opened onto the street. In 2 seconds, she was back in the kitchen. It's Mr. Higginbottom. He wants to see Kate. Well, ask him in, said Emma, slapping down her notebook and removing her apron. Show him into the parlor. He's probably come to ask if Kate will go back to work at the glebe. It was true. There'd been rumors that Kate was sorely missed at the glebe mill because of her expertise with the mule spinning and with her patience and knowledge of the machines. But she now worked at the textile mill, the new one. Jane knew it would take a lot for Kate to go back to the glebe mill, although she would dearly like it herself. She missed her older sister each morning when they walked together to work, the only time they could have a heart-to-heart talk, just the two of them. But for several months, Kate had worked at the new textile mill, which was in a different direction. Jane, go and fetch some coal while I light the fire, said Emma. Kate hastily smoothed her skirts. With a quick glance in the hall mirror, patted her hair, putting some stray locks into place. Make some tea, Eliza, ordered Emma, and use the best teapot. Mr. Higginbottom was shown into the cold parlor, just as Emma held a taper to the gas lamp and then moved to light the ready-laid fire, which was rarely used. Jane came in with a coal scuttle. She was slightly nervous. It was not every day a mill manager came to call. Tom Higginbottom stood with his back to the feeble output of the always obstinate parlor fire and rested one arm on the mantelpiece. Emma ushered Kate in, and they both sat on the sofa while Jane hovered behind them. He was a small man, but stocky and well-dressed, just like the manager of a mill should be, thought Jane. He had a good head of dark hair with specks of grey at the temples. I would like to speak to Kate alone, he said, frowning at Emma. What you have to say to Kate can surely be said in front of me, said Emma. Jane, you can go back to the kitchen. As Jane left the room, Mr. Higginbottom shook his head and turned to gaze into the fire, which crackled faintly, but could not compete with the loud ticking of the clock on the mantelpiece. Then, ignoring Emma, he said to Kate, how old are you now, Kate? 21, I'm sure. I believe I may talk to you without your sister being present. Emma stood up with an exasperated look at the mill manager. She too retreated to the kitchen, slamming the door behind her. The girls all sat round the kitchen table, questioning each other silently, hearing one firm voice from the room next door, then a faint, hesitant tone from Kate. In a few minutes, she came back to the kitchen, looking very agitated, obviously needing Emma's help. Emma at the ready rose. You don't have to go back to the glebe, she said. You can stay at the textile mill if you want. It's nothing to do with that, said Kate. He asked me to marry him.
Beautiful.
Okay, so that's just a little bit. There's lots of things that happen in the story, and there are, on the back cover it says, can they escape their humdrum existence and realize their dreams in the strict and harsh Victorian era? Well, those who don't already have my book, I know there's a few friends of mine here that do, it is available today for me for only $15, or you can still get it on Amazon and at the local bookstore. Thank you very much.
Don't run away there, Margaret. We want to see, people might have some questions for you. Just hang on. Margaret? Yeah, please wait. Just give us a few minutes in case anyone in the audience has any questions they'd like to ask you about anything about your writing or about the book. Personally, I enjoyed that reading very much. Great characterization, and your dialogue is so believable. Anybody have anything they'd like to ask Margaret?
Go ahead, Kathleen.
I see a hand waving in the back there. Just shout it out. And Margaret, maybe you can repeat the question.
Yeah. Oh, she's asking about the research process I use. Well, a lot of it, this is based on my grandmother. My grandmother is Jane, but it's mostly fiction because I didn't know enough. She died when I was 22, but she used to tell me little tales about the days when she and her sisters worked at the cotton mill. And by the way, I forgot to tell you that this is a really good rendition of the way it was in those days. There's the bales of cotton down here, and these are the chimneys of the many, many factories in each little village, which just swamped everything. But they look like spires if you half close your eyes. So that's where the title comes from. But so research was based on my grandmother, what she told me, and me following up with my mother, who also remembered, and also talking to people in England who's still in the cotton industry or in the historical aspect of the cotton industry, and could answer some of my questions about the machines. In some chapters, we do talk a lot about the actual mill and what actually they do there and what's expected of them. And from when they start when they're 10 years old until they leave when they go to get married. That was the only escape. So the research is mainly from books that I had acquired from people in the historical society of that area. It's not where I used to live. I used to live quite a distance from them, but I have people in that area that were able to get me some books and send me some of the details of the actual mills there. Okay.
Fascinating. Wonderful. Thank you. Any other questions out there in Zoom land or elsewhere?
Okay. Oh, yes. And my son, Julian in Nanaimo, he did the cover. He designed the cover for my book. And I really like it. It says it all. Yeah.
So Margaret, that's from my part of the world, my neck of the woods. Hi, sounds wonderful. And I'm really pleased that it's finally published for you. I know you wanted it for a long
It took
time.
me 5 years.
My question actually is, in your research, did you find out any of the names of the mill owners?
Yes, no, actually
No?
not mill owners,
Okay.
but somebody who read this before it was published said to me, that's ridiculous. A mill manager wouldn't ask a girl who worked in the mill, a spinning mule hand, wouldn't ask her to, well, that's ridiculous because my grandmother's oldest sister, she was called Emma actually, but it's all changed. It is strictly fiction, but there are a few true facts. My Emma, the oldest one, she actually did marry a mill manager.
Yeah.
So because the mill manager had grown up, he'd worked there probably since he was 10 or 12. He'd worked all his way all through the factory, knew every aspect of every step of the cotton production. So he was one of them really, except he earned a lot more money and he lived in a bigger house. Now a mill owner, that was something different. That he was a very rich person and lived in the mansion up on the hill. Yeah. So he was unlikely to ask a girl in his mill to marry him. He hardly ever went there. But this mill manager had worked himself up from a boy. So it was common for a senior person to marry one of the girls. Yeah.
And true love works in a relationship. I can't change that. But the reason I wanted to know that my childhood friend was, her name was Gillian Howarth, and a very wealthy family, and they made their money in the mills in that area. So I was just wondering if the name was Howarth.
I didn't actually know any of the,
yeah.
This is 1882.
Right.
And my grandmother may have mentioned one or two names, but I don't remember them.
No. Okay. But I'll still get the book.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Margaret. And just a reminder to everyone there, yes, the book is available. Margaret's got some copies, and we can also pick it up at Mobius Books or Amazon. Any last questions before we go?
When did they start with their child? 1870, the Education Act came in 1870. Up to then, little kids, 5, 6-year-olds were running around picking up bobbins, doing whatever they needed to do to help the family, and they got a few pennies a week for doing that, and there were terrible accidents. So legislation was brought in that children under the age of 10 could not work in the mill. They had to go to school. It was called the Education Act of 1870, and all children had to go to school full time, 9 to 4, whatever, until they were 10. And then when they were 10, they could, if they wished, work part-time, half a day in the mill, and then go to school in the afternoon. When they were 12 or 13, if they were proficient enough at reading and writing, they had to do a test at school, they could then leave. It's very common for them to leave at about age 12 and go to work in the mill or wherever else. Yeah. When did it stop? When did what stop? Oh, when the I don't know. I don't know that. That's something I don't know about. But I think probably in the 40s. Yeah, I don't know the exact date. Yeah, pardon? After World War II. Yes. Or during that time, yes. You see, there was a big change. This finishes in 1890, and then in the beginning of the 20th century, there was still huge production, but it was waning somewhat because the cotton wasn't coming through as much, because those countries, the US, where a lot of cotton came from, India, Egypt, they had borrowed the technology from the Brits, and they were now doing some of the production themselves. So it was starting to wane quite a bit, yeah. All right. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Margaret. Give her a big round of applause. Super. All right, I think we've probably got time for another open micer before we take a little break. And so next on my list, we've got Victoria Roscoe Romanis, who's live at Char's Landing there. So come on up to the mic, Victoria. And while she's coming up there, just a reminder for those of you on the Zoom, a little e-transfer to charslanding.com would be wonderful if you can afford it. Give a little donation to keep Char's Landing alive and thriving.
A bit low there.
There we go. All right, Victoria, it's all yours. Go ahead.
Hey, so yes, I am live, alive.
In person.
And hello, everybody. Lovely to see so many people here. This is the first time I've been here when I was on Zoom previously. So it's nice to be here and see so many of you. Maybe some of you are familiar with being in a dark place where life seems overwhelming and you need a place to run or find some spiritual help. And this is the place where I ran to, or run to still. It's called rescue. With urgency, my body is directed to seek spiritual strength and support for mind and being. Eagerly, I travel to meet with my noble, sturdy friends who are always there. I walk on the tranquil trail lined with vibrant green ferns that leads the winding way up to the waterfalls. Looking up to the sky through the majestic firs and maples, their limbs seem to reach down to welcome and comfort, as if they want to hug. There's a fresh, earthy smell, the air oxygenated by these gracious trees of the forest. It fills my lungs as I breathe deeply, eventually clearing away the pain, disentangling, burdening, and hurtful thoughts. The fast-running creek sings out a tune, drawing me close to its edge, where a fallen log makes a comfy resting place. Sitting, listening to the fast-moving water, humming as it encounters rocks and stones, troubled emotions are drawn into the flow and carrying them downstream to be lost in the ocean deep. Looking up, the branches are reaching up to the blue sky, as if in prayer. Oh Lord, hear our prayer. Once again, the forest bathed my spirit, giving enough strength to continue for another day. That's that one. And then I have one more. And this one was written for North by Northwest. They had the contests, and it was great having an assignment, and it was called an appetite for clothes. I visited the local SPCA, who had been gifted a litter of kittens that were part Siamese. I returned home with an adorable cream-colored kitten with blue eyes. I called her Sayoli after my beautiful Japanese friend. Sayoli, the cat, grew and divulged her interesting but not too welcome personality. While cooking one day, I put on my green and white gingham apron and noticed a short length of the tie belt was gone at the end, and it looked as if it had been torn off. I could not understand how that could have happened. When cleaning Sayoli's toilet tray, I noticed a piece of green and white gingham in her poop. Aha! This was the beginning of a line of Eton clothes. Sweaters and shirts were her favorite. I became diligent in putting my clothes away, yet somehow she still found a way to chew. Sayoli died at the age of 2 due to a heart attack. I was devastated to lose her, in spite of the fact that my wardrobe from then on remained intact. I now have a new cat named Lord Byron. He does not eat my clothes, but destroys all my upholstery. No, he will not use a scratching pole. I have tried several different ones. And yes, his nails are kept clipped. Well, cats, right? Cats. You just have to love them. Cats teach one to loosen up on material things and hold on to the things that are most important in life. Friendship and unconditional love.
Thank you, Victoria. Always positive energy out of Victoria's work there. I enjoy that so much. Okay.
Are you not chatting with me now?
Well, I was chatting as you were walking away, just saying thanks for the positive vibes. It's always uplifting when you read to us. Thank you. All right. So, Char, what do you think? Shall we take a little 10-minute break here and then come back for the remaining 5 open micers?
Sure. I mean, life is one big break here at Char's. So how does everyone feel? Do you need a break or you want to keep going? What do you think? Do you want a break? Raise your hand. They want a break. They want a 5-minute break. Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Go refresh your drinks, hit the bathroom. We'll see you in 5 to 10, somewhere in there.
Someone else is swimming from around.
No, I'm just seeing if I can read all this. I was wondering, instead of having the reader's face up there, put his words up there. Don't you think that would be better? Pardon? Oh, really? Okay. Because your words are more important than you are.
Yeah, but in this.
Okay.
It's all about.
Oh. No. I just wonder if it's worth a try. If it's worth a try. Pardon? Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, if if that's too much, don't worry about it. I just, yeah. 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 All right. Yeah. Okay. Yep.
All right, we're back.
David and Kathleen, they're always on. They brought a bunch of so they brought a bunch of
It was nice. That break was nice to have.
the break?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I didn't set my time. Yeah, okay. Yeah, let's, okay. Okay. Sorry, Derek, I neglected to set my timer. Did you?
No problem. It's been 12 minutes. It's all right.
It has been 12. Okay, because I'm just a little confused.
It's all
We
right.
miss you here. It's not as organized without you.
But
it is kind of fun though, right? Look at
because I like seeing the lights.
David and Kathleen brought friends from everywhere, including Germany.
Yeah.
And then Margaret brought friends from everywhere. And then there's Peter is here, hasn't been here for what, 5 years, 6 years. He works out of town and then Tomasz and Colleen have just come back from Hungary, and there's a lot going on here tonight.
Yeah, wonderful.
So welcome. Yeah, I think we're settled down. Oh yes, and of course, Victoria brought her pooch Nikita and brought Dean and sisters. Yeah. So it's a wonderful night.
Beautiful. Thanks. And great to see Tamasha and Colleen back. I was missing seeing you guys. You were such standards on the Zoom screen there, always with your glass of wine and great audience participation. So glad you could come and join us live. That's wonderful. All right, we're going to go back to our open mic readers now. And I think the next one that I've got on the list is Kathleen Vance, who's come from Gibson's Landing to join us live here at Char's Landing. So excited to hear what Kathleen's going to share with us tonight. There she is.
All right, I better not have it upside down. Let me do a sound check. Okay. Oh, no, can't hear me. Ask Derek. Derek's not talking to me.
I can hear you very well. That as long as you stay on your mic like that, it's perfect.
All right. Okay. I ain't got that kind of dough. You think money grows on trees? Besides, these three kids don't eat one meal between them. I didn't know this was a clip joint. I thought it was a proper boarding house. Aunt Flossie shrieked at the woman who owned the place. Ann, Mars, and Billy decided to leave the grown-ups arguing in the parlor and wandered through the house until the smell of food brought them to the kitchen, where they couldn't believe what they saw. A girl their age was crying her eyes out. "What's wrong with her?" Billy whispered to Ann. "What's wrong with you?" Mars asked the girl. The girl turned towards them, but she had tears pouring out of her eyes like Niagara Falls and couldn't possibly see them. Onions, she stuttered. "Onions? What's so sad about onions?" Ann asked. "No, she's not sad about onions. She's chopping onions. They make you cry because they contain an oily chemical that evaporates into the air when you chop them. The chemical irritates your eyes and your eyes try to wash the vapor away. I read all about it in Your Pocket Guide to Science," Ann and Mars chanted. They knew it was Billy's favorite book. They were sure he slept with it under his pillow. "He's right," the girl said as she wiped her eyes on the kitchen cloth. "You have to chop a lot of onions in a vegetarian boarding house. So I have a lot to cry about." "Did you say vegetarian?" Billy asked. "Yeah, that means," Mars started to explain. "I know what vegetarian means. It means you don't eat meat." Just then, a large man who was almost as wide as he was tall came racing out of the pantry at the back of the kitchen. He stopped just in front of Ann, Mars, and Billy and stared at them with gigantic glassy eyes. And over their heads, he held up what looked like a knife, except the blade was not skinny, but wide like a hatchet. "Please put that down, Pa. They didn't mean anything by it. They're new here," the girl said as she grabbed his arm. "Yes, please put down the knife," Mars said, and the man lowered his arm. "That's no knife. That's a meat cleaver," Billy said. He just had to correct Mars. The man raised his arm again and moved towards Billy. "Stop, Pa. Stop. He didn't mean it. He doesn't know." The man stopped and lowered his arm again. "My pa is so strong a vegetarian that he can't stand to hear the word meat," Ann shouted, figuring it all out at last. The man then stormed towards Ann. "Stop, Pa. Give me a chance to tell them." She turned to the three new children. "No one's allowed to use that word in this boarding house. Not ever. Have a seat at the kitchen table. You can each have an apple cider," the girl said as she set out some cups and carried a large jug to the table. "I'll pour one for you too, Pa," the girl said as she led him to the table. My name's Sal. I chop so many onions, they call me Sad Sal. But I'm actually a happy kid. I'm Mars and this is Billy and Ann. Pleased to meet you, the three said at once to Sal. But before Sal could reply likewise, the man threw his cup on the floor. He reached again for the cleaver, but luckily Sal had put it safely away. Just then, Aunt Flossie and the woman who owned the boarding house came into the kitchen. I've been looking all over for you kids, Aunt Flossie shrieked. This is our new friend Sal and her pa, Billy told her. Please to Oh, no, not again, Aunt Mars and Billy yelled. Before Aunt Flossie could finish her sentence, Billy whispered to her, can we live somewhere else instead? This place is fine. You kids need to eat more vegetables anyways. Why, when I was a girl, we ate nothing but vegetables during the week, and only on Sundays did we eat. The children held their breath and looked at Sal's pa. A nice roast, Aunt Flossie said. So what do you kids got to worry about?
Thank you, Kathleen. I think we have a theme of child labor going tonight or something. That's entertaining. Thank you. All right, and following up Kathleen is David Kipping from Gibsons as well. And David, I'm sure, is going to share some prose with us tonight, as usual, I'm thinking.
I'm at that difficult age, which starts at 18, and now I can't see and I can't hear properly, so I think we'll try it without the glasses. And Kelly Harrison Ray is here. When were the Winter Olympics in Vancouver? 2010. And that was when somebody introduced me to Shelley. She had this thing called creative writing. And I said, what's creative writing? And she said, come along and see. And I said, well, I don't know what that is. And she said, come along. And that's what I've been writing ever since. She's over there, Shelley Harrison Ray. I'll pick up the check later for that. Oh, can you hear me with this microphone now? Is that all right?
Yep, that's good. Just stay there, Dave.
Okay. Okay, good. Here we go. Long John Silver wedged his crutch under his left armpit, clamped his brass telescope with his right elbow, and pressed the cell phone against his black bearded jaw. Ah, Jim lad, is that you? Young Jim Hawkins? You're breaking up, Jim. Hold on. Long John hopped like a stork from the log house towards the fire smouldering on the little garrison's bare courtyard. Jim, are you hearing me, boy? Where have you run off to? Israel Hands spat at a sparrow, bared 3 remaining yellow teeth, and glared at Squire Trelawney as that good gentleman struggled fruitlessly against the ropes that bound him. Through the open gate of the stockade, Long John could see the limitless blue glitter of the Caribbean. Far below them, the good ship Hispaniola leaned, beam ends on to the island's rocks, tilting slowly with the morning's gentle tide. On its rigging, a ragged mob of birds fluttered and danced, taking random stabs at the body of a mutineer that young Jim Hawkins had dispatched. But the Hispaniola was half a league away, and Long John Silver's other conspirators 3 fathoms deep in Davy Jones' locker. Long John's mutiny was failing, and now the cell phone's battery was failing too. 10,000 curses on the dead man's chest. It was that fool first mate Flint, killed by a musket ball while peeping over the log palisade, who had signed a 3-year contract with TELUS without asking about roaming charges. The free bonus phone was at the bottom of Rum Cove, and this phone, which Long John had snatched promptly from Flint's corpse, and which now Long John would not share, despite his one for all and all for one speeches back in Bristol, would not share, meaning Israel Hands hadn't even had a chance to call his brother-in-law to say they'd landed. This damn phone was failing, and there were no charges to be had, or electricity for that matter, here on Treasure Island. Israel turned back towards Long John Silver as the latter consigned the worthless phone to the fierce flames, snapping and popping. Should have bought one of they walkie-talkie sets the trader was selling in the cart park behind the Bouncing Bosun, Hans growled. 2 extra packs of batteries free he'd have given us, and a waterproof case, and there's no annual fees with a walkie-talkie. A mile easy they can reach, he said, a mile. And for another guinea, he'd have thrown in that nice set of steak knives, something else we're short of here. But no, Flint had to load all those apps and Google Maps. And by the way, I caught you playing Grand Theft Naval when you were supposed to be on watch. Under cover of Israel's diatribe, Squire Trelawney turned his bloody face and whispered towards the good Captain Smollett, who was roped to a powder keg 6 feet away. Psst, psst, do you have he whispered even lower, the manuscript? Captain Smollett nodded and cautiously slipped a parchment scroll from the lining of his waistcoat. Have you noticed anything in the last little while? Trelawney continued. The captain gave a grin and nodded, his powder-burned hat slipping further over his noble features. Yes, indeed, he whispered. Israel hands shouldn't be here at all, not in the stockade. Ah, you spotted it too, said Squire Trelawney. Israel is supposed to be dead. Twice dead, according to the novel. Twice dead, shot and drowned. Israel had chased young Hawkins up to the schooner's topmast, tried to kill him with a dagger, but Jim shot him through the chest, and Israel dropped 90 feet into the bay. A magical sight it was intended to be, said Trelawney, him sinking slowly to lie spread-eagled on that pale gold sand, lit by flickers of sunlight through the sea water, circled by schools of little fish. The squire shook his head sadly and nodded towards the crinkled manuscript in Smollett's hand. Those screenwriters at Netflix, what a crew.
Thank you, David. Entertaining as always. All right. We're going to go on to another local reader there in Port Alberni at Char's Landing. Monica is our next reader. Come on up, Monica. Give us your Scandinavian flair this evening. We're hungry.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Hurricanes are in the news right now, both in Atlantic Canada and Florida. The earth is warming. We can see it all over the world with drought, and the oceans are warming, and that is primary fuel for hurricanes. Future warming may affect wind shear patterns, and strong winds are the ingredients for strong storms, according to National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. The globe is warming and finding that humans are played a role in it. I was going to write a poem about hurricanes, and that is not easy. I thought about musical instrument instead of words. Maybe music will come out of these storms. I bet it will. I found 2 poems that has been written by other people, and I like to read them for you. I feel it's very appropriate for what is happening right now. And this first one, it was in a really old kids coloring book called The Official Florida Natives. A friendly introduction by Carol Shore, Seashore Press in Florida. It looks like Shel Silverstein's poem. And it goes like this. Steam, hot, hot, gray, middle of day, clouds race, triple pace, bay waters black and white capped. Some battening down hurries up in town, then hammers of rain strikes the window pane. Thunderclaps overlap, palm trees whip at 90 degrees. shore breakers dredge, away settlement's edge, multiplied by a flood tide, and a house groans, overtones to the raging refrain. And the second one I thought was very lovely as well. Totally a different tone to this first one. And it's also called The Hurricane. That's the reason I'm dressed in raincoat. I'm ready. Threatening our tenacity that summer were the most turbulent bundles of weather. We drifted, guarding our freedom, and not thinking the errors we have made could prove our fragility. But then a gloss over imputed at Hatteras by that discreet brush of fog preceded a lagore at the marine where boats were sponged up like milk into the null and void. Out of the southeast, out of the free, will that vent undisciplined all day and night. The wind looted the coastline with more than one accomplice, stealing in quick sweeping gust the sheen of a generation endeavors. A sea in its turmoil rode a fast shuttle back and forth into an outbreak of foam, a sparkling seltzer of seawater that kept striking somewhere on shore, house-breaking and plundering. Terror lit up the eye of the lighthouse that stood on the edge of familiar warnings, listening. Ever so much in those desperate hours. What does it mean to violate an appeal for salvation, to surrender in exile, when at last the final scene plays out? What will it mean to be left without bread, without the reserve to take back, to take over, given nothing but the astonishing ruins of a landscape we merely have the means to stare at? Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. Beautiful.
Maybe, excuse me, maybe I should give out the names of the,
Sure.
I gave the first poem, but the other writer was Joanne Monte. I want to give credit to the people who have written this poem, and I thought it was so appropriate to what is happening right now, both in Canada and USA.
Absolutely. Yes.
Any
Thank you.
questions?
Let alone Pakistan. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. Yeah. Let's hope people in Florida are staying safe. The video I looked at did not look good, but let's hope it passes through quickly and dies out. All right, we're on to Joe Lunchbucket again in Port Alberni at Char's Landing. Joe, aka Bob Franco, is going to come up, our octogenarian plus, to share a few thought-provoking questions, I'm sure. Hello, Bob.
You can hear me okay?
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, just stay right there. That's perfect.
Oh, thank you. Uvalde Police had a quick action plan. Could more teachers and students have been saved if they did have a quick action plan? Will we need another Martin Luther Reformation to settle all nations' disputes by UN? Or do Neanderthals refuse compulsory arbitration because prolonged peace civilization would break 21st century Mongols' war industry corporation? Do US and Ukraine justify all the lives lost as part of joining NATO cost? Democracies held referendums on Quebec and Scotland's secession. Can Russians in Ukraine do the same? Is continued war insane? Will we be suckered into WW3 or break free from US lunacy? Opt out of NATO and accept UN ruling peacefully? Does media not ask questions because consent is manufactured, just as Noam Chomsky claims? Can UN prevent nations from overpopulating their land's ability to sustain them? Stop ensuring homes built on low land prone to hurricanes, and be a global warming world insurance policy to prepare for the next 10 biblical lean years. Do we require a lifeboat drill to determine who seats first in world droughts, who eats first in world droughts and famines, or will money always win, just like with medical tourism and body part sales? Are asteroids, volcanoes, tsunamis, and hurricanes intelligent design, or chaos and survival is the luck of the draw? Florida knew storm was coming. Why didn't they move their cars? Will prayers or technology divert asteroids that killed off dinosaurs? Is next generation ready for space colonization? Will we make first visitation, or is ET already landed and we are the aboriginals afflicted with their viral infestation?
Provocative as always, Bob. Thank you. Thank you. Keeping us thinking. All right. And Dean is our next reader. He is live at Char's Landing there. Nice to see him back. Hopefully he's going to share another Ned story. We'll see what he's brought along.
Thank you, Derek. I just found out tonight Char is running for council, so a good voice for the arts and small business.
Yes.
And I wrote a little tale partly for my darling sisters who are sitting here and kind of wonder what the heck was that guy doing all those years. So anyway. It begins in the present. Sitting at his kitchen table, looking out the window, Ned admired the new garden fence, nicely painted gray. 2 coats, actually. 1 extra to cover up numerous indiscretions committed during the building process. His tenant's neat little black car blended in nicely. Looks good, he assured himself. And then he began musing, how had he managed to pull it off financially? After little duplex and all in good old Port Alberni, after spending most of his life treading water or even going backwards financially. After finishing high school, Ned worked on the CN Railway for the summer, then started taking classes at UBC. But it seemed that the numbers were against him right from the start. You see, Ned and his old pal Dan used to cut classes and go to the Marine pub instead of UBC. Soon in calculus class, the board was swimming with incomprehensible numbers and terms, differentiation, limits. His other classes fared slightly better, but soon Ned had flunked out and was hitchhiking to Toronto's Yorkville in search of free love, drugs, romantic and mystical encounters. And again, the numbers confounded him. Yes, he found a communal house in Yorkville and got his share of mystical and romantic adventures, but his money moves all fell on rocky ground and nothing grew. Ned started doing odd jobs, often for the slave markets, as they called them back then, temporary help agencies. Work today, fast cash. But even then, Ned had a bit of a nose for money. He couldn't taste it, but he could smell it. Back then, there was gold to be made in southern Ontario in the tobacco fields. In a summer, he could cobble together enough moolah to take a freighter to Europe. Ned's plan actually worked. It was amazing how the money piled up if you just stayed in one job for a few months. Resto. Ned was walking down the gangplanks into Bristol, England, and soon he made it to London, where he had heard it was all happening. But his financial demons had followed him to the old world. Soon he was lugging furniture up flights of stairs for 12 quid a week and plugging shillings into the heater in his bedsitter next to the railway tracks. Oddly, even after an amorous night at his girlfriend's, the furniture seemed somehow heavier and the stairs steeper and slipperier. After a reckless trip through the continent in the old furniture van he'd foolishly bought, which died in France, Ned decided to seek his fortunes in Norway, or at least get enough dough together to pay for his passage back home. After thumbing to Norway through several language barriers, Ned landed in the youth hostel in Oslo, Norway. Soon he was walloping pots in a swank restaurant in Norway, but alas, fell into the habit of playing poker at the Oslo hostel. The bottom line for the game was, last call is just before sunrise. So often many fortunes changed hands just as the sun was starting to come up over the horizons. Suffice to say, no matter how hard he tried to analyze the odds of certain cards falling or hands winning, he usually fell short, the story of his financial life. Back home, eventually, lean years piled upon lean years. No matter what he did in T.O. Town, Vancouver, or up north. Age 30 found Ned eking out a living in Ottawa, smoking dope and doing odd jobs. Finally, he'd had enough. He could see the jaws of fate opening up into the future and little Ned being crushed by indolence, poverty, and frustration. That's it, he told his reflection in the dingy communal bathroom mirror. I've had it. I'm moving. I'm going to change before it's too late. No more pot, no more cancer sticks. I'm going back to university. I'm going to make something of myself. Ned would prove them wrong. That stupid farmer out in Saskatchewan who, seeing Ned hiding behind his pack sack, fighting the wind on top of a boxcar as the freight train rolled by the farmer's field, who hollered out, "Hey, you hippie, you're going backwards, ah, ha, 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 ha." Or old Murdoch, veteran of several insane asylums, having been hit in the forehead by a sledgehammer, who flatly told him, "You've got a brain, you just don't use it." But perhaps, predictably, the numbers would be waiting to trip him up again. And though Ned would find financial security, it would be more a matter of falling into it rather than magically opening doors. Click. There are no more financial problems, only opportunities and challenges. Thank you.
Oh, I can't wait to read the collection of Ned stories. I think that's got to get published one day. Dean, you need to get on it. Time's a wasting. So, Karl, I don't think we have any other readers other than me, right? Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay, I'm going to read a little bit of prose, and I have to say up front, Margaret and I did not collude on this. But before I sat down tonight, I was thinking, oh, what am I going to read? Because I've been working on some poems and they're not really quite ready yet. And so I said, oh, I'll read something out of something else altogether. And I started flipping through and I focused in on the wild pounding of my heart that Margaret talked about. And so hopefully she whet your appetite, and I'll read you a couple of pages from that. So the situation is, actually, this did happen at a literary arts festival in Victoria back in the late 90s. And the reader was Asian man of Asian descent in his 60s, who had put off writing his entire life and finally wrote his novel. We all have a novel in us, right? He finally wrote it and got it published, and everything else was going well. And here he was reading at a literary arts festival, which proved to be his last, unfortunately. So this kind of, I'm just going to read you the last couple of pages. So he's been through his life, and finally he retires and has a chance to start working on his story and tell his life story, basically, of what happened when he was a child in Japan and or in China, and Japan had invaded. So who knows how long he wrestles with that terror, hours, days, weeks, until that one moment when all the forces are perfectly aligned in his life, when the man climbs down from the tower and words explode onto the screen. And once they begin to flow, they come out in a torrent, so fast his fingers can barely keep up. I was sure that the soldier could hear the wild pounding of my heart, he types. At last, the story has been given its head, and it runs for all it's worth. It feels almost as if the story writes itself, as if he has seen it so many times in his head that he merely needs to take dictation. He barely remembers to eat. In fact, if it weren't for his wife luring him out of the den with fragrant dishes of gingered beef and barbecued duck, he probably wouldn't have stopped. Even then, at times, she has to plead with him, saying, "Please, please, dear, leave it in the middle of a paragraph and come eat. The lo mein is losing its steam, and you know how you hate cold noodles." One day he revises the final few words and tucks the newborn manuscript into a crisp manila envelope and sends it out into the world, hoping against hope that the publishers will recognize the importance of his story, and how the land of his ancestors could be their land too, could be any land usurped by another power. When his manuscript is at last accepted, his joy is undescribable. Perhaps his father was right to make him wait. It was all worth it. Once it's published, even the critics go kind to him, careful to mention the honest power of his story before picking at his prose. Before he knows it, he finds himself standing at the podium, the lead reader in a group of 7, and the auditorium is full. His throat feels narrow and dry as the dust at the bottom of a bag of rice. He has to keep his feet flat on the floor, or else his legs begin vibrating. When he speaks, his voice quivers and his head shakes. Is it just his nerves affecting his imagination, or is that a tower at the back of the hall? And the hooded man who is scaling the tower? Surely he must be a sound technician in a hooded sweatshirt checking a speaker. Whoever he is, the writer is certain that he can hear the wild pounding of my heart, even as he delivers that line. And he breaks from the reading for just a moment and addresses the audience frankly, saying, as I'm sure you all can hear the wild pounding of my heart right now. Their gentle laughter is a soothing hand that runs down his spine, even as he falters. But it stops abruptly when he puts his hand to his face, and it turns to a collective gasp when he lurches forward and then tumbles sideways for 2 quick steps before the full clicking out of the lights and the long unconscious descent to the stage. The audience sits stunned into immobility at the sound of his head thumping the hollow floor. Only yet one younger woman of Asian descent at the front has the wherewithal to hoist herself onto the stage and go to the man's aid. She cradles his head in her hands as if she is holding something fragile and infinitely precious, while the rest of the audience struggles to process what has happened. After a few moments, the MC appears on the stage and confirms that they are indeed witnesses to the premiere of a horrible movie when he utters, "Is there a doctor in the audience?" No fewer than 4 men extract themselves from their seats and advance to the stage, where they assist the Asian woman, who also turns out to be a doctor, to start CPR. She tips his head gently back and commences mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, breathing her life breath into him the way his muse had filled the pages of his book. Meanwhile, another doctor straddles the writer and begins compressing the writer's chest with his overlapped hands. Some of the audience break free of their trance and begin heading for the exits. Some are silently weeping. Couples cling to each other for support as they hurry to escape the confines of the hall, where the boom of the writer's head hitting the floor is still echoing around the house lights. Others find themselves rooted to their chairs, not for the sake of rubbernecking as they might while driving by a particularly nasty car accident, not either for the sake of support for the man lying prostrate on the stage and his fellow humans working to hold him in this world, though indeed they dearly want them to succeed and the writer to live. Instead, they sit paralyzed by one sound. As they sit with glazed eyes, beholding the unexpected drama before them, they hear nothing but the wild beating of their own hearts, and feel the weight of so many stories freely given, but still waiting to be told. And on that note, we will say good night to everyone. And before you all rush off or go back to chatting at your chairs there at Char's Landing, we want to say a few big thank yous. First one goes out to Margaret Growcott for being our featured reader tonight and sharing with us from her novel Bales and Spires. Thank you, Margaret. That was wonderful. Thank you also to all the open micers who joined us from around the world and they're in person at Char's Landing. Thank you all. Give yourselves a round of applause for sharing your work and inspiring us with your words and encouraging us with your applause. And a big thank you to Karl, our moderator, for keeping us on track, getting us all lined up tonight. And of course, wouldn't be complete without a huge thank you to Char, our hostess with the mostest, Zoom queen of Char's Landing. Thank you, Char. There she is.
Thank you to Derek.
My pleasure to sit in on this and be part of the sharing that goes on at Electric Mermaid. So I do hope everybody can find time to come back next month, the last Wednesday of the month. And I believe that H.L.Bryce is going to be our featured reader. And I'm sure Herb will be very entertaining. He's a great writer and musician as well. We might even get a little bit of music out of him, who knows. So until that time, don't forget there's e-transfer at charslanding.com if you haven't had a chance to send something along for Char from the Zoom land to keep this enterprise going. And for the rest, please stay safe, keep writing, and I look forward to seeing you all in October. Take care. Good night.
Night.
You made it, Derek, hey, with your sore throat. You're okay?
Yeah, I had the
Jennifer for
Kleenex
staying up
handy.
late, and for
Cup of
Leslie
tea
too.
and some lemon.
Thank you
Yeah,
for staying up
that's
late,
right.
there, guys.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Derek.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Good to see you. Thanks for hanging in there, Jennifer. And Leslie,
Yeah.
huh? You'll come back again?
I'll come back again. Yeah, I will.
Terrific.
Oh,
Terrific. That's
I hope
fantastic.
I can come there one day to visit
Oh,
Kathy.
yeah, for sure.
That would be
For sure.
fabulous. Yes.
Love
We're
it.
trying to get Jen to come out from Ontario too and have a live one
Yeah.
one of these times.
We'll send you a bus ticket.
Yeah, maybe come on
Yeah.
a book tour when your book comes out, Jen.
There you go.
Yeah.
Night all.
Good night, Jen, but we need to nail down a date for your feature read too for your new book. And so it looks like October and November are already spoken for. So can we put you down for December?
Tentatively, yes. It depends upon how long the process takes. We have the cover nailed down. I have the book text, and I'm doing my proofreading run through it. So it's pretty big. It's like 228 pages.
Wow.
And so I've got, I'm on page 37 or something. I did one skim through the whole thing and nailed down some things, and now I've got to go through it all thoroughly. Now, I don't know that it will take a long time after that for them to get the final copies to me, depending upon how many iterations we have to do. And then they have to be shipped to Canada from India.
Oh, okay.
But mind you, I guess I don't need that for out there because it's on Amazon.
There you go. There you go. Yeah.
Or will be.
Let's put you down for a tentative December then, and we'll just get up as time goes along.
And what's the date in December? I think I got it down.
That's going to be, it's going to be, hopefully it's not New Year's Eve or something, but the last Wednesday in December.
28th, I've got is December 28th.
Perfect. So,
okay, yeah, that should be okay. And if there's going to be some issue holding up the book, then I'll obviously let you know. But
Sounds
this will
good.
be motivation for me to get at it and keep proofing.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, it's a lot of proofing for sure, but you can do it.
Oh yeah, we'll get there. I'm good at it.
All right.
Night, Derek.
Sounds good. All right.
Can I say bye to Kathy?
Hi,
Night,
there
Karl.
I am. Hello.
I want to say bye, Kathy.
There you are.
There. Okay.
So when are we going to Ireland again?
Pardon?
When are we going to Ireland again?
I don't know. I don't know when all this is going to ever be over.
I know Florian has corona.
We used to see each other every single year.
Yeah.
Now, for 2 years, it's kind of all, well, more than 2 years now.
It's more than 2, but every year we met, every single year.
I know.
Uh,
So, Derek,
Yes, Kathy.
what happened with Colton? I got an email.
Yeah. Not good, unfortunately, on that front. Yeah, things. I think he went a little bit too big, too fast. So so he's had to fold his publishing house at this time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. So he's doing videography to sustain himself, and So it's I worried about that because he had so many titles coming out so quickly, and I think he just got ahead of himself there. Yeah. But I hope you're going to finish your manuscript anyway and just send it somewhere
Oh
else.
yeah, I mean, he's offered me some free advice if I can ever get hold of him.
Okay. Yeah. Messenger is best for him. That's what I've found.
Yeah.
If you're on Facebook Messenger, he usually responds to Facebook Messenger pretty quickly.
Yeah. It's hard to hear David shouting.
You shouldn't allow him to drink until later. Anyway,
Okay.
So sorry I missed you, Kathleen. I really, I would have loved to have been there in person with you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
next time.
Yeah.
Hey,
Hi,
David.
David.
Bye-bye.
Bye,
Okay.
Kathy.
Thank you for
Bye,
going.
Dad. Thank you.
Take
Thank
care,
you.
everyone. Good night, Leslie.
Bye. Good night.
Bye-bye. Good night. Good night, Carl.
Even say. No, you're not.